As far as ghost stories go, The Woman in Black is as bitter as they get. It's a morbid, dreary tale about unforgiving hatred and evil that feels truly unstoppable. In the context of modern sensibilities, the original 1983 novel by Susan Hill about a solicitor being haunted by an evil spirit in a big spooky house isn't exactly the most groundbreaking or compelling idea, but as an old school horror mystery drenched in a contemporary gothic atmosphere, I think it stands as one of the more simplistically provocative takes on supernatural period fiction. The story follows solicitor Arthur Kipps as he travels to a small rural English town to oversee the affairs of a recently deceased woman in her estate at Eelmarsh House. While at the house, would you guess it, Arthur begins seeing a creepy woman in black, and he eventually discovers that every time the woman is seen by anyone, a child dies in bizarre circumstances, which in the case of the movie's more overt approach is self-immolation and drinking corrosive chemicals. I mean, seriously, the movie doesn't shy away from killing kids in a grisly fashion. The Woman in Black is a story that becomes darker upon reflection because, unlike the more explicit detail in the film version, in the book we're only ever used to seeing Arthur's own personal ordeal within the house, as opposed to how his actions have an indirect and negative influence on the town around him. Despite the traditionalist structure, there is an eerie subversion to Arthur's ignorance. For the most part, he's simply just doing his job, and so, having seen the Woman in Black without any knowledge of what this could lead to, he unintentionally and uncautiously goes down a dangerous path that victimizes innocent children who have no control over their lives. In that respect, it makes for a grim outlook, given the parents of these children are hopeless to stopping the evil, and here we have some guy with no understanding of how he's ultimately responsible for the deaths caused by the Woman in Black. A couple of years after the book's release, The Woman in Black became famous in the UK for its adaptation into what is now West End's second longest running play, after Agatha Christie's Mousetrap. As a result, the film essentially has the best of both worlds to appease two specific audiences. A major part of the original story was the emotional toll of a horrifying superstition left on the town of Crathon Gifford, where the townsfolk have become alienated and seemingly hostile towards those distinct from their community. It really fits the gothic theme of deviance, where Arthur is just this ordinary everyday guy who is treated as some unwanted force of change because he's disrupting a status quo that the town has fiercely maintained. He's an outsider intruding upon a town that's deeply aware that their children are in perpetual danger, and the only way to prevent it is to basically discourage anyone from seeking it. It kinda makes the evil seem symbolically invincible. Because nobody is willing to brave their way to the house to figure out how to stop said evil, since it will only lead to more death in the process, it seems fitting to bury and suppress it, and just hope that nobody else uncovers it. But then you get into the theatrical roots where, for all the cliches and jump scares, is a persistent feeling of unease. You're never sure where the scare will come from, and the suspense is so prolonged that you're desperately hoping that sunrise is near. I actually found myself extremely relieved each morning within the film because at least it brought back some form of stability to Arthur's sanity. The film has a powerful sense of place where the atmosphere reinforces the isolation of Arthur. It feels like a genuinely lived-in world. There's something undisturbed about it, like the production team just stumbled upon the location and did nothing to change it. It adds this underlying authenticity that places like this exist. There's a gloomy naturalism to it where environments feel muted, the shadows are dense, and the lighting is sparse, which means your eye is never quite sure where to look, allowing for the presence of the Woman in Black to linger as you're constantly dreading her appearance. I specifically remember this being one of the most complained about films in the UK upon its release. You see, the BBFC, or the British Board of Film Certificate, usually give these sorts of films a 15 rating, except because the film had a few cuts to it, The Woman in Black passed as a 12A, meaning you had these idiot parents taking their underage kids to see it and walking out completely traumatized at the nature of its content. I mean, its violence is nothing remarkable if you're desensitized to horror. If anything, the story is probably more effective for children in the sense that children die as a result of some adult's blind curiosity. Seeing kids commit suicide on screen makes for quite a distressing watch, but it gives the story a profound gravitas that's usually uncommon because of the sensitivity of the subject matter. Since we have the loss of innocence stemming from an evil that can't be explained, there's this cruel futility to it, a certain nihilism where, like the characters, you hope there's a solution at the end. It plays to the opposite of period pieces about witchcraft and occultic conspiracies, where here there is no direct source to the woman's power. She's simply this aggressive, vengeful spirit with not so much unfinished business, but more so just this need to exert the same pain she feels onto others. What we discover is that prior to her death, the woman in black blames the death of her child on a town that wouldn't accept her due to a deviance that echoes the town's initial disapproval towards Arthur. She was an unmarried woman when she had her child, and this was seen as socially wrong, so her child was taken from her and given to her sister, who happens to be the recently deceased woman who owns the estate. When the woman in black meets her child again, from the window what she witnesses is an accident that saw her child drown in the marshes that surround the house. When it comes to acting upon this revelation, what's important about Arthur's perspective is that he has no personal tie to anything that's going on. It's not really his problem, he's simply there to do a job and get back to London. So unlike most traditional storytelling, there's no real certain tangible way to fix the problem. In the book, Arthur finishes his business, returns to London and starts a family, putting a town's haunted history behind him. Except while it's implied he must have lifted the curse because no child died during his stay, the woman in black actually follows him back to London and causes a stagecoach to kill his new family. In the film, however, I think it takes a much more thought-provoking angle that encapsulates the main themes of the story. Instead of being a recently engaged man, the film picks up after Arthur's wife died while giving birth to their child, leaving Arthur as this cold, depressed shell of a man who grieves constantly, and doesn't really have a purpose other than to provide for his one and only son. When it comes to confronting the ghost, he thinks that by finding the missing body of the woman's child, it will give her peace. And while this could be seen as a cop-out to give audiences closure to the narrative, sticking to the original source material, this effort proves to be entirely worthless. The woman in black is forever unforgiving. She has chosen to never end her reign of terror because she never found solace or closure while in life. So in death, it doesn't make a difference anymore. When Arthur returns to meet his son at the train station, the woman returns, controlling the boy into an oncoming train while Arthur jumps in to save him, and they both die in the process. While it echoes the quiet somberness of the story, we see the ghost of Arthur and his son confront the deceased mother, bringing them together and providing closure to their own lives, even if it never happened to the woman in black. The point about the woman in black is that there's a melancholy to the story, in that Arthur's mundane sense of self represents a fragile, unfulfilling existence. The woman in black feels like this purgatorial despair. It's such a basic tale that it's easy to miss how much it presents this forlorn world oppressed by something that ultimately feels inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. I don't think it gets the credit it deserves as this intimate account of British supernatural horror. It might not be the most robust or complex narratives, but it still aligns itself perfectly with many other subtle forms of gothic fiction. It's horror that doesn't seek to purely shock or disturb, but instead, it aims to make you feel partially vulnerable and sympathetic for a character whose life is reflected in the fearful realization that meaningfulness isn't always a part of the journey. Hi everyone, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of The Woman in Black in the comments below. If you want to vote on what the next video could be, just like this one, and even get early access and get your name in the credits, please do consider heading over to Patreon and supporting the show for just a couple of dollars a month. You can get access to our Discord chat where you can tell me what you're watching, what you're playing, what you're reading, whatever it is you're up to, because we're going to just talk nonsense over there and create a little community. It's going to be cool and awesome. And yeah, thank you so much for your continued support. Until next time, please go follow me over on Twitter and Instagram. And yeah, stay safe again, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.